Alright, welcome to the King CJ Music Podcast, where we talk hip hop culture. We talk about a lot of different outcomes of hip hop and so much more. So let's kind of talk about it, I guess. Um, so there have been clips, there have been audio recordings, there's been so many different things that we've disguised for years, especially when you're going against the people. In a RICO case, there's certain things you don't want to do. Um, those are take phone calls. Those are also this weird idea that if you're gonna make a RICO, if you're fighting RICO, you want to be careful what you say. Um, it's weird. But you know what? Let's talk about it. I think that's a good point. So let's let's walk down the path, shall we? Okay. So this idea that we can have two systems it's the La family belief from the mob. Um, this is interesting because when we talk about the mob aspect of things, people are like, that's not where hip hop got their culture from, or this idea that the L murder, the L family made men wise men. It's almost like people don't understand the context of hip hop and think that those rules apply. Let's start with one of the most infamous cases. You know what? I'll start with Young Thug. No, you know what? I'll end with Gotti. I'll end with Gotti. Um, I'll begin. Oh, this is so interesting. And people asking, why is this so interesting? Because there are many mobsters that I enjoy reading about. If that's Charles Lucky, if that's Al Capone, if that is if that's Sammy the Bull Gravano, if that is oh the name escapes me, but he was the accountant for the for the American Italian mob. Anyway, we could talk about Genovese. We could have some fun. We could have some fun if we wanted to talk about mob history, right? We could have some fun. We'd have a ball. Anyway, the intersection between these two cultures is so it's funny. It's not funny. It's not funny at all. But it's a little funny because people will go and say, "Well, you're not supposed to tell. You're not supposed to tell because in the street culture, if you tell, you're not doing something for the culture." And that is fine. I think if you truly believe in that street code, and you believe it from the mobs, and we can talk about the smaller organizations, then we can talk about the higher chances of being like RICO charges, and we could go Gotti and Sammy the Bull to end this. But anyway, us talk. I think, I think essentially, so Young Thug tapes have come out. He's talked about J. Cole, Drake. He's talked about Future. He's talked about Kendrick Lamar. He's talked about Gunna. There's so many people Young Thug has talked about. But this is the issue, and this is truly my issue with hip hop. Those tapes, those tapes have either been recorded or released earlier. I remember people talking about, hey, Young Thug is caught on record of blah blah blah. That was 3 years ago. But apparently they're picking mainstream up now, and these clips are resurfacing, where he's talking about different artists that they don't understand. So he's like, well, I don't remember any of the Andre 3000 songs. I don't remember um, a Drake not going necessarily, or Drake in this idea not going to talk and trying to get it free or start a young thug free movement. That is fine. I love to talk about all of that. Truly, it'll be a long episode, but I would truly love to talk about that. So I'm probably gonna split this up into sections, record it, figure it out, record it, and then just like put this all together. But essentially, let's start at the very beginning. I don't know how many people have experiences with this, but from what I have some understanding of the U.S. justice system. I picked up phone calls. And normally it goes, this is blank. Uh, you have a call from inmate blah blah blah. These messages are being recorded. Do you accept these charges? And da, 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 da. But the most important part here is those messages are being recorded, right? And we can talk about, do people have the right to legally record you, and we could talk about warrants and all of that, and I think that'd be a great episode, right? But that's the issue right here. The original call is, hey, so and so, inmate so and so wants to talk to you. There's a blah blah blah. Do you want to accept these terms? Do you want to accept this call? Um, Anything you say will be recorded. Um, they're even doing that on like corporate lines now, but you're being recorded for um more transparency. So why Young Thug is on record talking to these people, and I don't know, and I want to be fair, I'm gonna put this disclaimer. I don't know who's releasing it because it's accessible, but it's also you have to know these exist. And from my knowledge, when they were released 3 years ago, no one said anything. So them being re-released of him saying this is interesting. Um, that disclaimer is there because I don't know. I don't know who's releasing them. And so I don't want to say that these clips are lying, but Young Thug recently, or this previews of an interview that he does, he says that I don't normally do this. And I think that's a very interesting point to make. A distinction because I've never done this before. I wouldn't do this before. But I'll make those connections to that specific statement so much further down the line. But there's this it's I mean, I have a love for music, but I have a love for mob history, and so it's very. When you hear me, kind of like a little excited about this episode, I'm sorry, but this is a serious conversation because there were people, and I want to say this. He was in jail at this time, so for many times when you pick up the phone call, they're saying, "Hey, this message from so and so is being recorded." Um, which would mean that that's a hot mic, right? So let's. How do I want to do this? How do I want to do this? Do I want to go when he talked about 21 Savage and them saying that he paid for Gunna's #1 album to go #1? Let's talk about that because I think that's interesting. There's so much that YSL could have done for Gunna if they really wanted to do something for Gunna. There's so much they could have done, promotion wise, feature wise, for Gunna's album to go #1. Because Gunna at some point is still into this idea. He is still very popular, right? But that second aspect of that point is him saying that um, people are going to look at the funny if he approves of it because it's Gunna, right? And so it's weird because at one hand you're saying I paid $50,000 to back an artist so that he could essentially go #1. Now we could argue with promotion and stuff like that. We could do that, but he then specifies and says he bought bots, which we've talked about before. Buying bots for music, it's in the industry people normally do it. But the problem is he's being so open about it. People may be like, "Oh, well, if it's a common business practice, then I can't be upset about it," and that's fine. But it does take away from Gunna's #1 album a little bit in the eyes of hip hop, and that's fine if you can recognize that stain. But this is one of the weirdest arguments I've ever heard. Essentially, if he backs Gunna, it's going to impact the way he's perceived. And this is my question. Because originally it was get home if you take a plea like an Alfred plea or just a normal simple plea, we were fine with it. Do what you want, we're fine with it, get out. Because RICO charges carry 20 years minimum for each I count. You get convicted of 2. That is 40 years. So good luck with that. Right? We've seen what RICO charges do. But then, and I don't know if this is part of where hip hop culture doesn't understand the law and maybe that aspect of it. But if you're going to give somebody 40 years or 20 years minimum, there's not much room to move. If those years carry 20 years minimum or maximum, that's 20, that's 40, that's 60, that's 80, and that's only 4 charges. And normally RICO's carry 5, right? So it's weird because you said he's a rat. You let little baby, you let other people call him a rat in a song, and then get upset about it. Because if you hadn't put out a tweet, Young Thug, and I think this is part of the thing, if he had put out a tweet that he felt a certain way about Gunna, then it wouldn't have been an issue. But he kind of started this point that spiraled this event, and this is the thing. And I get it. In street code, there's a certain way and a certain ways of doing things, and you're supposed to take the charge. As he says, he was supposed to just take that charge. That's fine. For most crimes, that is fine. If you get 12 months for a misdemeanor, that's fine. But when we start talking years, a lot of people start to get wise to it. A lot of people get wise to it and don't want to do those amount of years. And I can't blame them, because if you're looking at 40 or 20 years or 60 as a minimum amount of years, you start going, is that worth it? And for some people it is, some people it isn't, right? So like this makes sense in the long scheme of things. The problem is, you said he was a rat, and so people called him as such, a rat, because that's saying that he snitched on a court case. This is the problem. This right here is the problem. Because technically, why is well, it's technically labeled as a record label. There were crimes. I assume there are crimes being committed under that record label banner, which is concerning because that's part of RICO. I mean, racketeering. There's crimes that can be committed. We could argue that you funded it. We can argue that it's organized as an organized group of people committing crimes. Anyway, racketeering. We could argue all of this, right? We could argue this entire case, each letter by letter. The problem is though, Gunna was asked a question and out for plea, and I think that's what happened. He signed an out for plea for that statement, and the question was why is LA gang? And Gunna said yes for that out for plea. Because let's be fair, an out for plea probably looks better than a normal plea, depending on how the lawyers did it. If he can get the conviction off his record, hey, take it. But you also did the same thing. Let's be clear. I think you also did the same thing. The argument if YSL is a gang, that could be debated from here to front. We could argue that it wasn't a conspiracy. It was organized. They in some sense they might have been trafficking. We could argue these for days, and we could. It's a weird case, right? Because you break down each point, you'll be here for hours. You break down certain points, you could be here for 20 minutes. It just depends on what you see. Anyway, it just depends on what you see. There could be a lot of different things included in this, right? But the issue itself is if YSL was a gang. Because that proves that it's organized conspiracy or committing a crime under C, and we could argue the rest later. The problem with that whole idea in that whole scheme of him saying, well, he could have put him in jail, is that Gunna wasn't the only co-defendant. And for most RICO, they aren't co-defendants. And RICO charges take time to build. They're not something where if you get hit with a RICO, it's not something like you didn't know. Right? We could argue all of this, and I could have like my people like do interviews and we have it in relation to music, and we could argue this, right? But it's a weird argument of, hey, him saying YSL was a gang hung me. I mean, not necessarily. I mean, partially it may have, but it wasn't necessarily a thing. And in rap culture, if you snitch, you're labeled a snitch for the rest of your life, which is fine, and I get that. But if you had any idea that the tapes were being recorded, I wouldn't have said this on an open line. We get to this next point, and I don't understand. It's this Drake thing, and this Drake, I get it if you. I hate to get political, but if you think about it from a standpoint of, hey, we can wash each other's hands. If you get me or are the face of the free thug movement, then we could do X, Y, and Z because it'll move forward my process for appeal. That's fine. Or to be let go, that's fine. But normally from my understanding, if you sign a go not a GoFundMe, but a petition thing, some of them work, some of them don't. But legally, petitions don't technically do anything. I'm not saying no petition all you want. But I don't know. And people are like, well, what was he gonna do? Like, you can get pardoned on federal charges, but from my understanding, they charged him with a state RICO. And so I don't know. It's interesting, right? Because you can argue, hey, he should have kept quiet. He shouldn't have said nothing. It should have been, hey, okay, we're gonna get this done. Got the case. But you also have to realize that you have to have a lot of pull to pull those, or you have to get a lot of public support to get a pardon. We've seen this with Lil Wayne. The artist is stuck in my head. I can't figure out who it is. Is it Kodak Black? It's somebody. There were two Florida natives. But that takes a lot of work. Anyway, he's saying that Drake should have done something, and that's why he's acting a certain way, and Drake wanted a favor out of him, pro quo, right? If you do a petition, I can talk, but I can't force him to do anything. Which this goes in creative freedom, which I mean, I get to a certain point. I do. I think I don't know. I think producers should have the final say on what goes on their official album, because it can boost their numbers. It can hurt their numbers. It's interesting. It's an interesting, like, to look at completely. It's extremely interesting. But then, as Drake said, he went to give him money when he got out of jail. But Thug also says he gave him a bankroll of money. Thug gave him nothing when he got out. But to be fair, I don't think anyone knew when Thug was getting out. I don't think on his first day out, I don't think anyone knew he was getting out. I don't think anybody. Not that I'm aware of. So let me say, not that I'm aware of. But I don't know. There's an issue with that, right? Because this is the thing. I think. Oh God, I think this is an issue. So this is my issue, and I get it. People have argued that the cosign is so important. And we'll go to that. We'll go to the cosign. Then he says that Andre 3000 won't be famous because he didn't put anybody on, so we don't have Killer Mike, apparently. The Roots, apparently. We don't have... Anyway. Hip-hop has always argued that the cosign is very important to hip-hop. But now we're saying it does not matter. And this is the problem that I knew was coming. Because Thug says, Andre 3000 put nobody on, Kendrick didn't put anybody on. Drake put people on, but not enough. Future didn't put anybody on. This is my question. And I think this is what I'm getting. Because a lot of people are saying, why should people do features? Why should older artists do features? Why does it matter so much? Why should they do a feature album? And my honest answer is Revenge of the Dreamers. Right? Because J. Cole put on Cause for a lot of people. When he put on Cause, he put on He put on Cos, he put on Omen, he put on a lot of different artists. JID being another. Like Eminem put on E Millie. Um, like so many people, and like Future put a lot of people to bring to the Atlanta culture. But that's the weird thing about it because there's no active proof of the cosign, but like Killer Mike has addressed this. Andre 3000 has addressed this. Outkast has addressed these issues that they've put a lot of people on. The problem is a lot of people don't know the people that they put on. Because I'd say Andre 3000 was a huge impact in Killer Mike's career. From my understanding, from an outside viewers looking in, I'd say he did a lot. The problem is, Young Thug's like, I don't know, and I'm like, I mean, I get the I'm not knowing part, but I think the track record stands for itself, right? That's like that I don't know. That's a weird argument to make, right? And I get it. If you don't want artists to do features and don't want cosigns, fine, and don't argue about artists shouldn't do features. Why do they have to do features? Because Hove did it. That's how we got J. Cole. Um, that's ironically how we got a Drake. We got Lil Wayne features. We had Rick Ross features. That shot up his career. So that's what I'm not understanding. And can we talk about this idea? I'll talk about that Drake aspect later. Um, so we got to the Drake phone call. We got to the 21 Savage phone call about Gunna. Um, and we have a lot of phone calls. And I think we talked about the Kendrick thing of Drake, if Kendrick not putting anybody on for a feature, and why should artists have to do features? Um, I don't know, but he's like, oh, he doesn't have the same morals, but him and Playboy Cardi are like similar artists to me. So that's why I look at that statement a little bit weird because they're like, well, he doesn't do this for his children. This anyway. Um, these are all like I'm not trying to make claims. I'm just like, from my understanding, looking from the outside in, um, some of them share things. Um, so we talked about the Future thing. We talked about the Andre 3000 thing. We talked about the Drake thing. And Future wanted a lot of people to trap music, trap hip hop. Um, what is time to be alive? Life is good. Him and Drake have done a few things. They've collaborated, had some fun. Um, and I think that's part of the issue. Because now what I'm saying is Atlanta's divided, and we could talk about the county of Atlanta, and this is not Atlanta. Anyway, but like looking in, people are like, well, Atlanta's divided. I don't think Atlanta's divided. I think the problem is that when you say um there's no need, the cosign's no longer important, well, people go, cool. Well, then if it's not important, just do features. Um, and with people pushing back on those features, they're like, oh, cool. Well, that's great because Atlanta thrives on features. They've done a lot of features for a lot of different people, and so when you get people that come to Atlanta and do Atlanta features, songs normally go amazing. Um, Not so much anymore, but that's the overall theme. So let's talk about this issue. And I don't think anybody will talk about it. We've had a few responses, but not enough responses. And so when we get enough responses and say that snitching is bad, we can talk about snitching is bad. But there's also this thing that people don't realize that civilians. Some people are civilians. If you're not part of that street culture, some people are civilians. You can live two different lives and still love hip hop and be part of that culture without putting in like physical work and doing things to get tats or bandanas associated with it, right? Because they're not wise guys. There we go. There we go. Okay. Like we could argue the wise guys things and they're not underbosses. We could talk about that culture where we kind of have taken names because originally hip hop gangsters used to pay for artists to get famous, and we could talk about that and we could argue that. But I wanna make this note while I'm here. We could talk about cases where we've had people like uh Johnn Gott, the infamous Rico case. And I say infamous for many different reasons, right? Gotti, I don't want to say he was paranoid, but like he was very thin. Like he, if he knew his phones were tapped, this is the thing. If he knew his phones were tapped, he would have phone calls outside. He would avoid being, hey, this phone call is being recorded. Like we could talk about if the phone is like not necessarily dialing up, but like if you hear like static in the line, it's probably being tapped. We could have some fun, all right? But Gotti essentially didn't want to be tapped. He had phone calls outside. He was basically one of the godfathers of the modern day American Italian mob. Because what he did essentially was make it to where it was very hard to tap Gotti. He was a Teflon Dom. He essentially could have been a Rico case because they couldn't prove to him. He was loved by everybody. So was Thug. He just he was just he was just that guy to a lot of people. He just knew what to do. Business as usual. Hey, if I'm being tapped, use somebody else's phone. Take phone calls in a certain area. Make sure there aren't bugs. And that was him outside, right? That was him outside. When he was outside, when he was inside, you can hear some of these interviews where he just seems like he's talking in code or having normal conversations because he knows that jail phone or that prison phone, or we could talk about incarcerated phones, but they're recorded. So why the did this is I'm not sure. But then we have more evidence because he, like, let me say, the only reason Gotti went to jail is Sam made a bolt. And I'm not a mob guy, so let me be clear. I'm not a wise guy, I'm nothing. I just like mob history. I like reading mob history. But like from the evidence I saw, right? But Young Thug's argument is that the people around him signed plea deals. I don't know what to tell you. Some people are gonna sign plea deals, especially when you have enough co-defendants. Somebody's gonna sign a plea deal, and that's all we saw. This is essentially his problem. He knew he couldn't necessarily count on people, but I don't know. I want to say this is a disclaimer. I want to say this is a message to anybody that's like listening on a jail phone. But like these essentially, I thought it was these messages are being recorded. I don't know. He says it's because he was in there for like 3 years, and I get it. After 3 years, maybe maybe you don't switch up your dialect. Maybe you don't change your tone. Maybe you have straight conversations like that, and maybe you do. I don't know. But we've seen this before where people get locked up for crimes, and they're like, "What did we do?" You told on yourself, because normally RICO charges take years to file. Um, right? I don't know. I think this is the issue. Drake and Little Baby had like opinions on this Thug situation too early, and so everyone went behind him. Oh, he's a rat. We should listen to him. And we don't know what's in the Alfred plea from Gunna, because if that's part of the Alfred plea, I mean, he's just a big Alfred plea. Apparently you can't come to Atlanta for what is it? What is it? Is it 15? I think Thug can't come. I think Young Thug can't come to Atlanta for 15 years because I think he can't be in the area for 15 years. Um, so that's part of the issue there. Um, I don't know because I think this is the thing, and people are gonna say, "Well, he wore a dress." Cool. I mean, we let that go. A lot of people let that go. Same way the people let these recordings out, they let that go. There are certain songs where Young Thug raps, he's like, I'm telling it and I'm singing, and people just let that go. Which brings me back to Andre's 3000's point of, hey, um, y'all just care about the beat, y'all don't care about the words. And he's not wrong. As we've seen. It's interesting. I don't know. What do I compare this to? Do I compare this to the depositions of like people? And then if I argue this to the depositions, I will go Lil Wayne's deposition, where he's asked questions repeatedly. He's like, I don't know. I don't recall. Basically, him pleading the fifth. And Gunna's like, if you don't have enough information, just let me know. Which I get it. If you're trying to get out of prison or serving time and you want probation or you want something that is less is going to affect you less, yeah, I get it. He says, but the world can't know. And I get why the world can't know, because if the world knows he's like informing to the cops, he's essentially not a useless. He's a useless CI because people won't tell him information, so I have conversations with him in the room. I guess this is the thing. If they're gonna argue that anything, I would argue that Young Thug's a CI, and people will argue, well, if he's a CI, he's a snitch. But I mean, those aren't necessarily the same thing, because I could plant a bug in your house or on your line and not give them any information, and you give them all the information yourself. I don't know. I don't know. I argue this point because I don't necessarily know where I stand. I think essentially we could argue and say that Young Thug said on a call that somebody let drop, hey, if you need information, call me. No one can know. As a sign, he knew he was going to tell. But sedition implies intent, or in my understanding of law, my understanding of gang culture, it implies intent. Right, like I think Sammy the Bulls, and I don't want to speak for Sammy the Bulls, so let me clear this up. I think my understanding of what Sammy the Bull did for was his family, so that's why he got out of life. Oh, didn't the Iceman talk about it? Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but anyway, there's a book called The Iceman that a former mob hitter, I don't know what I can say, so I'm gonna go mob hitter, and talks about Sammy the Bull a little bit. Anyway, I said, oh, but he's called that. Anyway, if you're looking for the book, he's called The Iceman, and that's essentially what I'm like to get. But essentially for Young Thug, I don't know, because the two cultures overlap. But I don't think anybody would call Young Thug a wise man or a made man. And we could argue he is. We could argue he isn't. I don't know his actual sheet that is involved in why, if how many times he's been in jail. I can't argue that, essentially. But for a lot of people that are like, oh, this is part of the culture, cool, do you have any proof? I get it. The audio clip is very much telling, and this is not an issue with hip hop, because if everyone knew he was an informant or a CI, why did no one do anything and let the clips fly for 3 years? But now when it gets picked back up again, when he essentially, I assume he's on probation because he's out, doing interviews. Why did no one say anything? I mean, Thug said something. Didn't he do a song with Charlie Quan where he talks about this? But no one addresses this, right? And there's just this rumor that Drake has a 28-minute clip of Thug talking about him, and I'm trying to figure out why. I don't know. I think this case is messy, but the culture has made it even messier. And people are like, there's a divide in Atlanta and in Atlanta music. I don't think it will be. I don't think it. I don't think it will be. I think the issue though does lie in, are these recordings become from a reliable source? If you're the whistleblower, I wouldn't come forward with. I wouldn't come forward with nothing. I would remain a whistleblower, but I don't know. This isn't even legal advice. I just would be like, I'd be very careful. Um, because Young Thug is making a lot of different claims about people now that in interviews he's making a lot of wild claims. Um, and they just seem to be letting people go with these claims. And with these claims, if he has proof, I would prove it. But he's just going well on about these claims of like people still being on medication. Um, I guess he's claiming PTSD. That does. I mean, we could argue that PTSD isn't only in veterans, but people that have traumatic experiences. We could argue he had a traumatic experience. Like we could argue all of this, but there's like no. And I'm not even gonna challenge anybody's like medical diagnosis because I can't do so. But there's I don't know. There's concern about the state of hip hop. There's a concern about okay, so if hip hop is only going to make conscious rap music that only applies with people's morals, then there's no song of the summer for hip hop. There's no recognition for hip hop. There's hip hop loses a lot of its momentum. Um, you know, and that's like I don't know. I think this is a wild thing to do. Because from the start, I think that's a wild idea. Because that's essentially how they got short too. Is these ones are being recorded. Um, Let me say I'm sorry. Let me do this. Right. That's essentially what these claims have come down to. But they should be accessible. But I don't know. I'm not like gonna go access these like clear cut audios. I don't like it's weird. I can't imagine people. Hey, let's talk about tap. I don't know. But like we're seeing these shifts, right? Because he's like, well, I'm not a snitch because, and I'm like, cool. Oh, let's talk about another situation. So I don't know why. I've had the slightest idea because I assume this is the reason that he got the RICO indictment. I assume I'm not entirely sure, so let me say that. But in the early 2000s, Wayne got his bus shot up, and I believe it was New York. Anyway, he was somebody shot up Little Wayne's bus, and the media went crazy about it for like a couple weeks. Little Wayne's bus gets shot up, and I assume that's what that interview is about because I haven't heard anything yet um about that like entire 2 hour interview that he sat down with an unnamed organization for 2 hours. Uh so I'm not entirely sure who he but he took a plea, I assume, for 15 years and he can't be in Atlanta. So it's gonna be difficult. I don't think Atlanta's divided. I think the issue is though somebody has to fill that spot because trap music has normally given us, or trap hip hop has typically given us songs of the summer, like T.I., like Ludacris, like Future. It was Young Thug, but who out of Atlanta can do it would be the question. And if I'm Future, I may do it. I might call Drake. Um, I don't know. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about this other thing, or our final topic for today, and that essentially is Rick Ross's idea of saying that Iceman was bad. If that's the final cut for Iceman for episode 3, a lot of people don't like it, and that's a fair assumption. But can we stop with the colorism kind of concept of his label is I mean I don't enjoy bullying, especially for album promos, right? Because if and I don't get this because you're like he's a white man, so his next album is White Man, and I get I just That's like somebody being funny and be like, his next album is PO Man, right? Like Parolo. Like this it doesn't take time to not be funny, right? Because Freeway Rick Ross, I think you keep forgetting that Freeway is where you originally got your name from. And so if Freeway wanted to drop a diss song on Rick Ross, I don't understand it, right? I don't understand it because that would be glooming over my head. Joey Badass did with Loaded Lux. He said, "You want to put a battle rapper against me? I may go get Loaded Lux." If I was Drake and I wanted to respond to Rick Ross, I would just go get Freeway. I would just, hey, you want to go do this? Like I don't know. I don't. Mm. It's gonna be an interesting couple days, and apparently, I don't know if there's even gonna be. There might even be more clips out there of him telling on people, and if there is, Young Thug, I think the best thing to would have been able to do was to make a song, do whatever you want to do, and then day one you get out, make a song, disappear. But you did. So we're here and you're like telling stories. And so that's where we get dangerous because we're getting into dangerous territory. Why are we snitching now? The world will never know. Um, for example, when it was Sam and Bull, people kind of understood. You kind of want to become a family man. Okay. We'll leave it at that. And people are still mad about that to this day. Um, Like they're like, and this is, and this, and I kind of hate having this knowledge because I can see the future. It's like almost seeing the future happen again because you're doing this, and so if something happens to Young Thug, not saying it will, but if something does, it looks bad on YSL, but also that's gonna kind of be you've kind of made yourself your target because if Young Thug and this isn't legal advice, but if you are going to if something had happened to Gunna because you said he was a rat, that you're probably suspect number one, right? Or if something happens to Young Thug, hip hop is subject number one or two. And so like this, like I get it. It's not telling us La Family. It's not, it's not to tell. Like I get it. We're getting into mob territory as a culture, but we are like, what are we doing? Right? Like, what are we? Next, there will probably be a bunch of hip hop heads going to meet in New Jersey and having a conversation of what he should and what he shouldn't do. Right? And at that point, we get a little repetitive. But it's only because hip hop, hip hop, the same culture that's like, hey, we should not like snitches, we let snitches go. Tekashi 69. He told people like, oh, I'm cool with it. They were like, Gunna did it. Oh, he's a rat. Cool. But those are two heavily different extremes. So either you're cool with Tekashi telling, you're not cool with Gunna telling, and that. So when Thug tells, what's the middle? There isn't a middle. Those are two extremes that are rarely supposed to happen. They happen, and hip hop was like, oh well, we're mad at Gunna. We're not mad at Tekashi because we knew he wasn't a serious guy. He wasn't a wise guy. He wasn't a made man. But he was funneling money into an organization. Young Thug, I assume, was funding money into YSL, but I don't know. I don't know how that label structure worked. Um, so I just I don't know like the understanding of it surprises me because I'm like if you knew they were coming, you know where I would be anywhere else. Um, because I would assume my phone is tapped. I don't know. Like if you hear a call and it keeps dropping, it would make you a bit paranoid. But but he was on a jail. I don't know. I just feel like YSL as an organization is great. Um, It's structured where artists can get their fame. TDE, where we had J Electronica, we had Schoolboy Q, J Rock, amazing artists, could have been funneled through with support and been tagged, and we can get Black Hippie, or we can get that J Cole and Kendrick album come together, get that album. But like putting people on has just been a part of the hip hop culture for 8 years. And so not doing that just kind of seems strange because the next topic is who's the next big three. We don't have a big three because y'all didn't want to put anybody on for our cosign. So in 10 years where we go, where's the cosign? I don't know. We have JID, but he was co-signed by Cole. So I don't know how reliable that is. And that just seems repetitive to have. Yeah. With that being said, though, I know this will be longer side of this episode because I got a little carried away because we talked about Rico, and so I want to talk a little mob detail about it, some previous mob history. Great, but also like showing the comparisons of it, right? Like Gunna told you, cool. Takashi, oh, we knew he was joking. He wasn't really part of the culture. Great. So where does Thug fall? If you want to call a Thug a snitch, where does Thug fall between those two extremes? Drake should have been the face head for the free Thug campaign. What was he gonna do? Does he have the access to do that? Because if he doesn't, that's a wild extreme to do. Because he flew to Thug the day he got out, sent him a big roll of money apparently, and Gunna didn't do anything. So I think at a certain point hip hop becomes hypocritical because we hold them to these same points again, and no one has an answer. Anyway, I'm rambling. I feel like I've said the same thing twice. With that being said, I hope you enjoy the King CJ podcast. This episode right here is off the type, off the long. Oh, this is gonna be a long episode. With that being said, I do hope you enjoy, and I will see you in the next one.